Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. If you haven't heard the big news breaking this morning, URI received its largest single gift from the Schilling family, not that Schilling family, a different Schilling family of $65 million. That family had given a significant gift about 10, 15 years ago as well. But today's was the one-time largest gift ever to URI, $65 million. Let's head down to the University of Virginia. We've got Jennifer Lawless. She's the chair of the Political Science Department. Professor, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
There is no shortage to talk about. President Trump has hit the ground running in naming appointments, and it has been rapid fire, much quicker than previous presidents have started dropping names. Let's go through some of the most, let's call them newsworthy appointments. Attorney General Matt Gaetz, former congressman, he resigned from Florida. I think there was one day when the investigation by the Justice Department was announced, you were on with me on Go Local Live and predicted that I don't think he'd last too long. He has not only lasted long, but he is now President Trump's appointment to head the Justice Department.
This is not a serious pick. This is a complete slap in the face, not only to Congress and the Senate that traditionally has to advise and consent on the picks. It's a slap in the face not only to the FBI because he has decided to forego an FBI background check. It's a slap in the face not only to the Ethics Committee in the House that was about to release its report, but Gaetz resigned ahead of time, but it's a slap in the face to the American people. This is the person who is going to be in charge of the Justice Department ostensibly when he himself has been associated with various criminal elements, has engaged in clearly unethical and potentially illegal behavior, and has zero experience whatsoever in terms of running a large agency. So it's offensive, it's not serious, and it's just a way for Donald Trump to demonstrate that he's going to do whatever he wants and he doesn't care about the consequences.
Democrats seem to be offended, but many Republicans seem to be more offended. He was not a popular guy in the Republican House. Does not seem to be a particularly popular guy amongst Republican senators. Many are casting that his chance of confirmation are unlikely. Was this just an attempt? Gaetz needed a way of getting out of the House before the House Ethics Commission issued its report. This would then create a situation in which Republicans could say, look, we stood up to the president and shot down one of his nominees. Is this more gamesmanship than reality?
No, in fact, I think that you're assuming that they're playing a game of chess, and I'm not even sure they know how to play checkers. This is a situation where Donald Trump believes that Matt Gaetz is incredibly loyal to him. He believes that he has been wronged by the justice system in this country the same way that Donald Trump is, and he believes that he'll do his bidding for him. In fact, he has said that if necessary, and he has gotten John Thune and other Republicans that were seeking the leadership position to agree that these appointments would be recess appointments, which means that they don't actually require Senate approval. So even if there were 4 senators that were willing to vote against Gaetz, and I'm not sure that there actually are, a lot of these senators have a great talking point, and then when the rubber meets the road, don't actually cast the no vote. We can look back to Brett Kavanaugh for that. This is who Trump wants, and I wouldn't be surprised if this actually winds up being his first attorney general. And I say first because my general bet is that most of these people won't last because the people he's nominated literally do not know how to do these jobs.
Thune, I believe it was on Fox, said that he didn't think in the case of recess appointments that would work particularly well for the president because those who objected, in the case of Gaetz as an example, those who objected would object to going into recess, and he needs his members to agree to going into recess. So he kind of, Thune speak, we need to learn it. He's the new majority leader for the Senate. It appeared that he sort of drew the line on that one, certainly as being a recess appointment.
Although notice that he said that they will not push for recess, they will try to avoid recess appointments, assuming that the Democrats play ball. And so what that means is that Thune wants to make it very clear that if the Democrats generally vote yes on nominees like Marco Rubio or others who they might disagree with ideologically but are qualified for the job, then he would give the Senate the opportunity to actually vote up or down on some of these more controversial appointments. But he hasn't said what that threshold is. He hasn't said what playing ball looks like. And I think he's basically trying to have his cake and eat it too and leave every door open. I also have no confidence that there are 4 senators who would vote no on Gates.
Let's go to the issue, though, of sort of, listen, Marco Rubio, you may not agree with him ideologically, though.
He's qualified for the job.
He's qualified for the job. Why shouldn't Democrats vote for him? I worked for John Chafee. John Chafee said, listen, there were Carter appointments that he didn't like, but it's the president's discretion. He got elected by the people of the United States. President Carter gets to appoint who he thinks is the best person for that position.
Democrats may very well vote for him. Keep in mind, though, they don't have to. There's no question that somebody like Marco Rubio would get the 51 votes among the Republicans in the Senate. There are a whole bunch of Democrats who would vote yes because of his experience in the Senate. He served on the Foreign Relations Committee. He has intelligence experience. But there are going to be others who vote no based on the substance. And that has become what a lot of these confirmation hearings have been about. It's not the case necessarily that being qualified is the only thing. It's also, do you believe that this person can represent the country and put the best interests of the country ahead of their own or ahead of their parties? So I think on a Marco Rubio vote, there are legitimate reasons for Democrats to vote yes. There are legitimate reasons for them to vote no, but he's not one of these nominees who won't get through. Some of these other ones, the Republicans are actually being put in a very difficult position. Are they going to hold these nominees up to a basic threshold of experience and qualification, or are they going to kowtow to Donald Trump and just let him do whatever he wants? My bet is the latter.
Yeah, but let's break this down just a little bit. Wouldn't all of Congress have more credibility? The United States Senate, by following advice and consent, is if Democrats, let's just use Marco Rubio because I think he's the most mainstream appointment named so far by President Trump that requires advice and consent. So Donald Trump names him. In the olden days, 20 years ago or so, that nominee, especially coming out of the Senate, would probably get 90-something votes. Why shouldn't Democrats vote overwhelmingly? Totally speak on. Let me just finish on the for 1 second. Speak out on the floor where you disagree with him on policy initiatives, but he is qualified to serve as the Secretary of State. Thus, when they raise concerns about appointments like Matt Gaetz or Robert Kennedy Jr., that criticism would have far more viability in the minds and hearts of Americans.
Because it doesn't. Because it doesn't have more credibility. Because we're not in a situation right now where if the Democrats do what would be sort of unifying for the country on one dimension, that they'll be given sort of due deference, and Republicans will reciprocate that when a nominee like Kennedy or Gaetz is up. The Republicans didn't overwhelmingly vote for Joe Biden's nominees, who, by the way, were all qualified. None was out of the mainstream. None was being thrust into a position where they had no business being there. And so I think from the Democratic Party's perspective, enough already. They've been the adults in the room now for 25 years when the Republicans have been unwilling to play ball. And at this point, if they disagree ideologically, I don't think there's any downside to voting no. The other thing to keep in mind here is that they're not pivotal. I mean, I think that the issue is more problematic if the Democrats had control of the Senate, then these kinds of questions become an issue. Like if the Democrats had control of the Senate and Donald Trump nominated somebody like Marco Rubio, the Democrats would be facing a difficult position. Why should they not approve him? Donald Trump won this election. Marco Rubio does not need one Democratic vote to get confirmed. And by the Democrats extending their votes, and a lot of them will, but by an 85 or a 90 vote in support of Marco Rubio, the Democrats extract 0 from the Republicans because the Republicans.
I understand about extracting from the Republicans, but I'm talking about making a demonstration to the American people. Let me just go to, are you suggesting that Chuck Schumer should use all tools, all rules, put holds on everyone, delay everything they possibly can, block the doors,
Yes.
light the fires, burn the Capitol down.
Yes. Yes. I think that the Democrats need to take a play out of the Mitch McConnell playbook from 2009, which was right after Barack Obama got elected. When Congress convened, he said the Republicans' goal was to make him a one-term president and to make sure that they did nothing to help Barack Obama. I think that the Democrats should take a play out of the playbook regarding immigration last year, where the Republicans bill because it would have given Biden a legislative victory. The Democrats need to start playing by the rules that the Republicans have been playing for a long time. This is not an ideal situation. This is not, if we were starting from scratch, the way we should try to get Congress to work together. But given the current state of affairs, unless the Democrats want to get steamrolled every single time, they at least need to be willing to demonstrate they can fight. They still might get steamrolled every single time, but they need to fight. And frankly, giving Donald Trump any kind of success heading into the 2026 Senate elections is a mistake on the part of the Democrats.
Talk a little bit about, let's handicap some of these appointments and their likelihood for approval. Matt Gaetz, approval, up or down?
I don't think there's going to be a vote on any of these guys. I think if the Senate votes, they're going to approve all of them. I don't think that there are 4 Republican senators that will vote no on any.
Collins, Murkowski, Grassley. You don't think they get to 4 on Matt Gaetz?
I don't.
Okay. Same for Robert Kennedy Jr.
That's a little bit more likely that they could get to 4 or 40 even, just given his background. But I would highly doubt that we would see Kennedy go through a confirmation hearing. Now, again, a lot of this comes down to what John Thune ultimately does. But, 3 or 4 days before the election, Donald Trump's transition team advisor said that under no circumstances would RFK Jr. be given a cabinet post. He actually laughed at that idea. And this is where we are.
But listen, John Thune is not beholden to Donald Trump. In fact, John Thune, according to reports, handily defeated Donald Trump's candidate, which was Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, and that Thune, who is a Mitch McConnell guy and has a history of being more pragmatic rather than an extremist, why wouldn't John Thune want to establish himself as a national leader and potentially be a presidential candidate in 4 years?
Well, why didn't Mitch McConnell?
Well, because Mitch McConnell is already old.
Look, I think I take no confidence in somebody being in the mold of Mitch McConnell or being as pragmatic as Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell gave Donald Trump every single thing he wanted. And I think that at this point, the composition of Congress, both the Senate and the House, are far more Donald Trump's Republican Party than anybody else's. And keep in mind, too, it's not like John Thune voted for impeachment. It's not like John Thune ever voted to hold Donald Trump accountable for anything. So I just don't see it happening. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that people who are in positions of leadership to actually put up some guardrails do it. But over the course of the last 9 years, there have been very, very few examples of people willing to take those risks, and almost none of them have been on Capitol Hill.
Let's shift over to the Democratic Party. Seth Moulton.
This is all very uplifting, isn't it?
Yeah. Seth Moulton was on CNN reiterating what he had said last week to the New York Times relative to a recalibration of the Democratic Party. He used the issue of transgender, saying, hey, listen, I don't want my daughters on a playing field with, someone who was previously a male athlete being run over. That seemed to be the most effective ad run by the Trump campaign and seemed to be directly tied to swinging the different in the margin. I hear it all the time from people of how not only effective that ad was, but the lack of response by the Harris campaign to that ad in any way, shape, or form in advertising or in spoken word. Seth Moulton has been heavily criticized by members of the Democratic Party for bringing up this issue. Talk about where the Democrats are in their reflection, Moulton's communication, and the reaction to him.
I think Moulton is dead wrong. I think he is parroting Republican talking points. I think he's giving life to hate, and I think it's appalling. That said, the Harris campaign, I think in retrospect, should have responded to those ads. The Democrats have a long history of not dignifying certain ridiculous claims with a response. The Democrats didn't respond to the independent expenditure ad regarding Willie Horton, and that very much hurt Michael Dukakis in 1988. John Kerry didn't respond to the Swift boat ad in 2004, thinking that there was no way that that would actually work, given that he was a Purple Heart winner and George W. Bush was a draft dodger. It did work because Democrats didn't respond. And this time around, I think there were things that the Harris campaign just assumed were not worth responding to. Some of the ads about illegal immigrants committing crimes and making it seem like this was happening everywhere all the time, they didn't respond to. They just stayed on their own immigration message. I don't think that was enough. These trans ads, I don't think that they responded because they didn't think they were going to have the power that they had, and that wasn't enough. Even little things like Donald Trump saying that Kamala Harris never worked at McDonald's, they didn't respond to that because it was a ridiculous claim, but it's a claim that people wound up believing. So my general sense is that it's not necessary for the Democrats to abandon their policies and their preferences. It's not necessary for them to continue to perpetuate the hate-filled rhetoric and these concerns that are not affecting 99.9% of the US population, but instead just being used to scare them. But they do need to respond and explain why these attacks are not legitimate and why they're not the threat that the Republican Party wants people to think they are. And when Seth Moulton goes out and says what he says, he's doing the Democratic Party a disservice.
So let me break this down a little bit. I just got off the phone with a former Republican GOP chair in Rhode Island who said, listen, I don't agree with all this stuff, but what Trump's been able to do is like what Reagan was able to do, which was expand the party. In this election, he brought in more blacks, more Hispanic voters, more Asian voters, more young people. And while everyone didn't agree on everything, there was something that people agreed with. Moulton is saying, hey, listen, the Democratic Party needs to be broader. And the stomping on Moulton for even raising these issues and asking for this self-critique seems to be right into what Moulton is raising the issue about.
I don't agree with that. I think that the Democratic Party needs to explain why its message is broader than it's perceived as being. But let me just say a few things. First, there's gonna be Monday morning quarterbacking forever. But basically, my general sense of what happened is that the economy and presidential approval, which are the two fundamentals of any election, were on Donald Trump's side. In March, Joe Biden's presidential approval was roughly 40%, and perceptions of the economy were crummy. At that point, political scientists and modelers said that the popular vote for the Democrats would be roughly 48%. Fast forward, things didn't really change. Biden's approval remained there. Harris was part of that administration. Perceptions of the economy didn't really change despite some changes in objective indicators. And Harris got roughly 48% of the popular vote. Now, the Democrats thought that having such a flawed candidate would ultimately counteract some of those fundamentals, and they didn't. But when we talk about the map that Donald Trump won and where he expanded and the gains that he made, I think it's important to keep in mind too that the overwhelming majority of gains that he made were among previously unregistered Republicans who lived in rural areas. He drove up his margins in Trump country. Now, yes,
yeah, but he drove up his margins in Central Falls, Rhode Island, an overwhelmingly Hispanic that went from 10% to 20%.
He made progress with Latinos. There's no question that he made progress with Latino men.
But it wasn't just rural America. It was in Providence, Rhode Island. If you go on election day voting, he won Cranston and Warwick. Rhode Island is a state in which there is no Republicans in the delegation, no Republicans in the general officers. There's only one registered Republican as a mayor, and he improved by 8 percentage points versus how he performed against Joe Biden. It's not just rural. It's not just rural Republicans.
He improved his margins in New York. He improved his margins in various states that were not competitive. I don't take those numbers to mean much because there was no presidential campaign there. So there was no active campaign where Harris was refuting Donald Trump in Rhode Island or in New York or in Virginia. And
There was
so
no
I
Trump
look
messaging
instead,
here. There wasn't a single
I look at,
presidential ad.
yes, but there was, if you look at the 7 battleground states where the campaigns really made their arguments, Harris did far better than she did in the other 43 states, which means that if the Democrats actually take their message to the voters across the board, they can be effective. Now, she
No,
lost those
she lost
7
every
battleground states,
swing
but she also
state.
lost those battleground states largely because rural margins were up. So I am not willing to concede that in these states where there was not an active campaign, where the campaigns did not put the money and the resources that they put in the battleground states, that we can draw much of a conclusion from that. And I also think that the Democrats' main problem, separate and apart from the economy and from the Biden administration's low approval rating, the main problem for the Democrats is messaging what it is that they want to do and how they want to do it. It is not about abandoning their values and their core principles and moving to the middle. Democrats are split on that, but I do not think that the Democratic Party is a party that should embrace hate or discrimination or fear. And concerns about trans ads are buying right into that, and I just won't do it.
So there's about 15 more minutes to be able to reflect on the campaign because the midterm elections clock actually it's already begun, and you need to start getting some candidates over on that Democratic side. Are you going for more caring liberal progressive candidates, or are you going for more middle of the road Bill Clinton economy, former business people who are going to be much more focused on the economy?
I think that the Democrats would be well served to think about the 2026 elections as locally as they possibly can. Now, there will obviously be national messaging, but in the special elections that will be coming up to fill vacancies in the House because of various appointments, and certainly for 2026, what the Democrats should be doing is trying to identify people who can win in particular districts and who can win in particular states. So Elise Stefanik, for example, is in a red district in upstate New York. It's a district that is less, I think, less fervently red than a lot of others. She was initially elected as a moderate Republican. The Democrats should be able to find somebody in that district. There's a state legislator, I think, who they're eyeing, who could potentially win based on local issues in that district. I think the same thing is true across the board. In every single district where Donald Trump won or Kamala Harris won by a margin of, less than 4 or 5 points, I think the Democrats have to be really, really careful and really deliberate about what resonates in that district and finding it.
Yeah, I'm going to push back just a little bit on that campaign in which the Republicans swept the midterms against Obama. That messaging was demonizing Nancy Pelosi and tying Obama to Nancy Pelosi. All the ads across the country included footage of Nancy Pelosi. So I think while, yes, you want the best possible, strongest candidate, there's going to be national themes. And if the economy is strong, if the economy is strong, Democrats are in big trouble in the midterms.
I don't think that that's true, because even if the economy is strong, mark my words, between now and the midterms, Donald Trump will have wreaked havoc on this country, and there will be chaos, and all of the things that people forgot will come back to them. But
so is the Democratic strategy? So the Democratic strategy should be, hold on, let me just pick up on that. The Democratic strategy thus should be approving all of his cabinet appointments as quickly as possible to get them into position to wreak havoc on the country.
I think it's cute that you really think it's going to go to a vote. Like, this is not going to happen. These are going to be recess appointments. The Democrats are going to have no say whatsoever. Also, they're all going to get approved. They don't need one Democratic vote, so it doesn't matter.
Right? No, I understand that. So why slow it down? If his administration is going to be that detrimental, get the detrimental over with as quickly as possible.
Oh, because I think there's a degree of responsibility. I mean, I think there's a fundamental problem if there are candidates that are going to have national security access who are not getting an FBI background check. I think that there is a a due diligence responsibility among members of Congress until Donald Trump says that these are going to be done as recess appointments and the Senate agrees. I think the Democrats have a responsibility to vet these people, not just push them through. And frankly, you don't want to vote for somebody that you think is going to be a disaster. But if it turns out that they are a disaster and you didn't vote for them, it's fair game to use that. But what I will say is I don't think that that messaging is going to be enough. I think that that national messaging can potentially help the Democrats. But if they don't have candidates in these districts or in these states who can also speak very specifically to the issues and interests of that state or of that district, then the national tide will dominate. And I think you want to try and mitigate against the national tides. It's hard. The map is not great for the Democrats in 2026. Can they pluck back 3 seats? Maybe, but they really need 4 because J.D. Vance would be the tie-breaking vote. I don't know if there are 4 there. They can definitely focus on the House as a guardrail, though.
I think Netflix has made a major mistake of not picking up this instead of going with the Mike Tyson fight tonight, because this has been far more interesting. You get the last word. What should we be looking for this coming week?
I mean, I think the 2 things that I'll be looking at are, first, are there going to be will there be a contingent of Republicans who are actually willing to vocally say this is too much, and not just say, well, these aren't the nominees I would have expected, or this is surprising, but actually come together as a group of 4 or 5 to say they are going to stop this, because that's what Thune would need to know is happening in order for him to, bring these nominees to a vote. So that's the first thing. Are there going to be vocal Republicans? And then the other thing, frankly, is what are the Democrats' plans for moving forward, and how are the Democrats going to start articulating this? I don't think it's helpful for them to air their dirty laundry on TV. I think that Hakeem Jeffries needs to start convening some serious meetings to figure out what the overall message is and how they're going to achieve it and win in 2026. Part of the reason that the Democrats have been successful in other midterm elections, and certainly were successful under Nancy Pelosi, was because dirty laundry was aired behind the scenes, not on CNN.
As always, greatly appreciate it. Everybody stay tuned. Friday has already been a rock and roll day, and we expect things all throughout the weekend. Big college basketball games, big URI football game. Can Brown get a winning record in the Ivy League in football? It's the first time in more than a decade. Lots of things going on. Everybody stay tuned. We'll have all the coverage. Thanks, everyone.